Welcome back to another reading of Because of Mr. Terupt. Today we are joined by Mr. Beaver, who is a part of the otter family. So anybody part of the otter family is a big fan of mine. We've got a blanket that not only matches the beaver, but it matches Diego's blanket. Trying to get a whole brown theme, a monochromatic theme going on. With that, I have a light brown mug with some more finger holders so I don't drop it, and my little digits can stay warm as I'm drinking my warm lemon water. Delicious. Alright, last we left off, we were hearing a lot of self-blame or guilt about Mr. Terupt's accident. So let's read Luke's chapter and figure out what's going on. I didn't think it would be as difficult to go see Mr. Terupt the second time. I knew what to expect. But boy, was I wrong. Seeing Mr. Terupt in that bed again wasn't any easier. I thought he would look better. I thought he was improving, but he looked the same. Still just lying there in his bed. Surrounded by the same beeps and tubes and monitors and noises from the hall, it was all the same. I felt the lump in my throat growing. Mom's hand touched my shoulder. She saw it happening too. I stood at the side of my teacher's bed in a state of disbelief, feeling helpless. Then the doctor walked in. At least I figured he was the doctor. He had salt and pepper hair, a white coat, and a smart face. He nodded to us and then moved toward Mr. Terupt. He checked some numbers and fluids, pulled back Mr. Terupt's eyelids to look at his pupils with his penlight, and then started to leave. "Wait," I said, "wait!" He stopped and turned around. "Are you Mr. Terupt's doctor?" I asked. "Yes, I am. I'm Dr. Wilkins, one of the physicians." "Is Mr. Terupt going to get better?" I saw him take a deep breath. He looked at my mother first and then at me. "I don't know, son." "And what's wrong with him? He's in a coma, but, what's wrong with him?" Dr. Wilkins pulled some chairs over for us to sit in, and he sat across from me. "Mr. Terupt did a lot of wrestling while he was growing up, and even into some college," he started to explain. "Turns out he had to give it up because he suffered multiple concussions along the way. These concussions have weakened his brain in certain regions. The snowball that was thrown hit one of these weaker areas, the temporal region. Temporal is a dollar word. To be exact, it cracked his skull." Dr. Wilkins looked very sorry as he said this. I didn't know if he expected questions, but I had tons. "Does that mean Mr. Terupt wouldn't be in a coma if he hadn't suffered the multiple concussions?" I asked. "Well, I can't say for sure, but probably not." "What do you do now? Just wait?" Dr. Wilkins took another big breath. I got the sense there was more to the equation, more bad news, more news he was hoping not to share. He glanced at my mother, who nodded, giving him the okay to explain. I didn't want to sugarcoat this report. I didn't want a sugar-coated report. I wanted facts, and my mom knew that, so I think that's why she let him continue. "Mr. Terupt has some bleeding going on behind his crack. Blood is collecting in the brain." Collecting is another dollar word. "We hoped it would stop, but it hasn't. He'll need to undergo brain surgery so we can clamp the bleeding vessels. And then he'll be okay." "Well, if it works, hopefully yes." I heard the word "if" loud and clear. "And if it doesn't?" I asked. "Brain surgery is risky. There's always a chance the patient won't recover." "You mean die?" I said. My mom put her arm around me. "What's your name, son?" "Luke." "Yes, Luke. Your teacher could die during or as a result of this surgery. But I'm going to do my very best not to let that happen." I got up and stood by Mr. Terupt's bed and looked at him. Dr. Wilkins got up and stood next to me. "He's a pretty special teacher, isn't he?" the doc said. I could only nod. Speaking would have made me cry like a baby. "Luke, I'll do my best. That much I can promise." He squeezed my shoulder and then left the room. Brain surgery, I thought. Mr. Terupt might never come back? I ran out into the hall. "Dr. Wilkins!" I yelled. He turned around. "Does anyone else in my class know what you told me?" Dr. Wilkins walked back toward me. "We didn't know anything about his concussion at first," he said, "but another teacher, Ms. Newberry, was able to provide us with Mr. Terupt's background information. I guess Mr. Terupt had told her about his wrestling days, and it's a good thing because we have no other contact person for him. He stood there quiet. No other person? There was nobody for Mr. Terupt? But to answer your question, there is another student in your class who knows what I told you, Dr. Wilkins said. Who? I think he said his name was Peter? I was silent. Peter? I didn't think Peter had been here. Dr. Wilkins turned and left. Wait, I said again. Does Peter know about the concussions or just about the brain surgery that's next? Just about the brain surgery. Why do you ask? Well, I asked because Peter's the one that threw the snowball. Okay. So that wraps up March. We're going to begin April. And we're going to start with Jessica's chapter. Acts 10, Scene 1. Mrs. Williams assumed responsibilities as our teacher. She recognized and acknowledged our huge mess, and that our feelings, despite being just fifth graders, were very real. I respected Mrs. Williams for her courageous act, but it didn't change a thing. Mr. Terupt still lay motionless inside a vast whiteness and beeping of that building. Our classroom remained as lifeless as our teacher. We needed Mr. Terupt back. Things happen for a reason. That's what I told Jeffrey. Did I believe that? Sometimes. What were the reasons for my dad leaving us? I haven't figured that one out yet. And the reasons for Mr. Terupt's predicament? I've decided they're different for everyone, and maybe not there at all for others. I see the reason for Alexia now. Without this accident, I'm not sure she would have made it back as my friend. Without this accident, I bet Danielle would never have made it over to Anna's house. But what about someone like Luke or Jeffrey? I don't see any reason for either one of them. And I can't find a reason for me yet. Luke's chapter again. The classroom persisted in secreting, unbroken quietness. Secreting and unbroken are both dollar words. I stayed quiet too, even though I had a lot bottled up inside me about Mr. Terupt's brain surgery. And Peter knew about it, but he didn't have all the details. I know he blames himself. You can see it. Ever since the accident, he walks around like a mummy. He should be blaming himself. He threw the snowball. But if it had hit anyone other than Mr. Terupt, I don't think we'd be experiencing a tragedy like this. And that's what Peter needs to know. It doesn't make everything all better, but it might help ease his pain. I can't tell him, though. No one's talking to him. But that's not why I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to find out why he threw the snowball. Danielle. It was springtime. I sat on the front porch with Grandma after church. She drank her coffee. Black, because she's tough. I sipped on some iced tea, unsweetened, because I want to be tough like Grandma. I love these moments with Grandma. There's nothing like a New England spring, Danielle, she said. You endure the harsh winter, and because of that, you learn how to really appreciate the new season. I knew what she was talking about. The snow had melted, the birds had flown back, singing and praising, flowers popped up, buds appeared everywhere. The animals on the farm acted frisky. Time to rejoice, but I couldn't, and Grandma noticed. I'll bet you, in other parts of this country, where there's no real winter, people miss out on spring, Grandma said. That's just a shame. I nodded. The spring was different, though. My teacher still slept, and this weighed on me and sucked the happiness out of everything. I felt like I was still in my winter slumber. Danielle, let's pray. I bowed my head and closed my eyes. I figured Grandma was going to thank God for beautiful weather and the gift of spring and all that. That would have been fine, but she took me by surprise. She prayed, and she said this, Mr. Terupt needs you. Now. I don't understand teachers these days, but I've come to realize that this Mr. Terupt is as good as they come. I've seen how he's touched my granddaughter and her friends. He's special. You don't need him up there yet, so make sure you give him back to us real soon. Thanks. Grandma had understood the important stuff. Her prayer actually made me feel better. I always feel better with Grandma on my side, even when she's telling God what to do. Thank you, Grandma, I said. I love you. I love you too, sweetie, and I'll keep praying for him. I stayed in my winter slumber even after Grandma's prayer, but then, unexpectedly, I startled awake. Not because of encouraging signs from Mr. Terupt, but because of Anna's shocking news. All right. let's read Anna's chapter and see what shocking news she has, and then we'll stop after that. Anna's chapter. I pumped my legs back and forth on the swings. I needed to get some momentum so that I just wasn't sitting there with my feet dangling in the puddle below me. Danielle, Jessica, and Lexi sat on swings too. Danielle right next to me, and it was nice to be outside for recess again, now that the snow was gone. Charlie was at my house when I got home from school yesterday, I said. Danielle's pumping stopped. Mom told me they were just sharing a cup of coffee and some conversation. Danielle pumped slowly again, but she didn't say anything. If Charlie marries my mom, what would that make us? Sisters? Danielle put her feet down and hopped off her swing. She turned to face me. My pumping slowed. Was something wrong? She looked right at me. Anna, Charlie will never marry your mother, Danielle said, because my family would never allow it. I stopped my swing. Jessica and Lexi stopped theirs too. Why? I asked. My family, Danielle started to say, and then her chin and voice lowered. My family doesn't approve of your mother. I felt like I just got run over by Charlie's red truck. My whole body grew weak. But my mom's a good person, I said. I know, Danielle said. She scuffed the mud with her foot. But it's not that easy. If it weren't for Mr. Terupt's accident, I don't think I would have ever been allowed to go over to your house. I learned something that day. Even after all this time, my mom was still ostracized for something that happened long ago. And because I had contributed to Mr. Terupt's accident, I was going to pay for it for the rest of my life. Let's read just a little more. Jessica, Act 10, Scene 2. I discovered another reason for Mr. Terupt's predicament, the day Anna and Danielle and I were on the swings. A reason bigger than simply getting Danielle over to Anna's house. That was only a start. Just like Mr. Terupt had helped Lexi reunite with Anna, Danielle, and me, I had to wonder if maybe Mr. Terupt's accident was going to help Danielle's family accept Anna and her mother. I hope so. I do too. Jeffrey. Boring day after boring day puttered by. Life was back to normal, where everything stunk. We all thought about the same thing, but never talked about it. Not everybody together. Little groups whispered here and there, but that was it. I didn't participate. Too many bad, scary memories for me. Then something happened to break the silence. And that's where we're going to pause. Okay, we'll pick up with Jessica's chapter next. And we'll find out if Mr. Terupt is going to be getting better, what this big news is, and how things are going to change before the end of the book. And if you'll notice, we've gotten through a large portion of the book. Okay? We're through all those pages. We only have this little bit left. So I feel like it's going to start speeding up anytime, and we're going to come to a whirlwind of an end. I hope you're enjoying the story. See you next time.